Christmas again. So we've got the church really decorated up now. You see, we went from what did we have last week? We had
a plant.
We had a plant, and now we're moving up to angels. And by the time we get to Christmas, probably have Jesus up there, right? That's the nativity scene or something. So, and Roxanne is back and joining us once again. Hey,
Hi,
Roxanne,
Father.
it's nice to have you here again.
Merry Christmas.
So yes, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. We also have a new whiskey of the week. This time we have another Glenfiddich. I had Glenfiddich last week, which is a 12-year, but now we've got another interesting one brought to us by one of our parishioners who is in Walworth and recommended this to me. This is Fire and Cane, not cane like Cain and Abel, but like sugar cane, because it's finished in rum casks. So you can tell it's got a very, very nice, it's got a very beautiful, pretty color. But true to the Highlands, it's got a little bit of smoke to it. But so that's kind of the fire, that campfire thing. Our parish council president always likes to say that my scotch tastes like warm Band-Aids to him. I would say peaty smoke, yes. And so anyway, this is a really interesting one. Unfortunately, again, can't try it here in the church. We're gonna have to wait until we get to get back to the restaurants. So anyway, that's our whiskey of the week. I know we've already seen a couple of questions coming in now from some people. One of the great things, and I kind of want to start here with a disclaimer, I guess. We've been on long enough now that we have attracted quite an audience, and the questions certainly are getting more and more difficult. The issue has become, as I've mentioned on quite a few of my shows, I am by no means a professor of theology. I do not have a PhD. We have quite a few people like Hosea Trentham, and Terry's going to correct me on that name, who is at St. Vlad's Seminary, and many theologians at our schools who are able to answer a lot of these very, very deep questions that you're getting to. So I do not, I can't rip a Bible verse right off of the bat. Maybe
Me neither.
Okay, I can't do that. So some of these questions really require me to go back and to research it. Now, we had a couple of questions left over from last week. I can answer some of those now, but I want to be clear that what we want to do is we want to answer questions about Orthodoxy, and through kind of an easy discussion, we want this to be inviting to everybody. So please understand that if you bring up a certain Bible verse or something like that, I may have to research that because I'm not going to know it right off the bat. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. Oh, and also, if you want to, you can also email us, and we can answer your questions that way too. So I try to get back to each one of the questions that we've had, or that we have, if they're left unanswered. All right. So where are we right now?
Well, right now we're going to answer a question from Spiro Sinus Teresis, who says, if we're not supposed to judge, but instead forgive and forget, how can we have a justice system and it be okay?
Well, yes, we do have forgive and we don't have forgive and forget in the Lord's Prayer, and it says we ask Him to set them aside. Aphisomen. It doesn't mean that He forgets it. We don't have the word naxechasis. We have the word aphison, to set aside. Those are set aside because He will come for judgment. I mean, we will be judged by Jesus, right? Jesus never said you have a free pass. He said you have been freed from death. But that doesn't mean that He is not sitting at the judgment seat. We always say the fearful judgment seat of Christ. There is judgment coming. So we've never been told not to judge, all right? So what we are called to do is we're called to forgive. But that doesn't take a criminal off of the hook. If somebody is murdered or beaten or raped, that person has to suffer those consequences for his or her actions.
Is it sort of like, what is it? render what is unto God what is God, and unto Caesar what is Caesar's. I mean, I know it's about taxes, but this whole idea that there's a secular justice system,
Yeah.
and then there's the concept of forgiveness, right?
And yes, there's the concept of forgiveness. The reason I don't use the one anymore about render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's, because really what that meant, what Jesus was saying is there is nothing that you can render to Caesar that is not God's already. So it doesn't really exactly fit. It's not a separate, people have used it as separation of church and state. That ain't what it is. It's God saying, as the Orthodox truly believe, that everything belongs to God.
Right, but you can forgive someone for doing something, like somebody does X, right? And someone in your family suffers as a result. You can forgive them, but they're still going to have to face the consequences of their actions in sort of
this
like
world
the
and
legality.
the world to come.
Right.
In this world and the world to come. I know in the prayer of confession it says, "Have no more anxieties about the sins that you have confessed." All right. So, but again, we are sinners all the time, right? So there is it's a strange kind of mixed bag, because on one hand, you're right, we have ultimate forgiveness from Jesus, all right? But we also say that with his second coming, we will face the judgment seat of Christ. We say it in our liturgy. So there is a judgment aspect to this. Or we wouldn't have the memorial prayers, right? Think about that, right? Think about our memorial service, right? Mm-hmm. If nobody was going to be judged and everybody's go to heaven, what am I having a memorial prayer for? We don't see the memorial prayer as just, we're remembering Uncle, Uncle Yorgo or Papa Yorgo. That's not just about, that's for us. We're actually praying that God will judge them righteous to enter into heaven. And so if nobody was being judged, the memorial service would be stupid. There'd be no point to having it.
No, I know, but they're so soothing. I feel bad for people who don't have those kind of customs in their culture.
I agree.
Because there's this idea that you lose someone and then boom, you're over it. You know what I mean? Like you get
You're
back
right.
with it. And I think that that's the beauty of Orthodoxy, is that we mark the passing of time and we continue those prayers.
Yeah, the
Because I think
9-day prayer, the 40-day prayer, the 1-year prayer. Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
marking of time, and that we honor that there was a loss.
So anyway, so hopefully in that set, so read his question again just to make sure we got it.
Oh, hang on, because there's been so many under
Oh.
there. Thank you, everyone, for participating, by the way. Because he follows up with a question. If we're not supposed to judge, but instead forgive and forget, how can we have a justice system and it be okay?
Okay, so I think we've taken care of that. Okay.
All right. So John Lewis. Hello, Father. I've decided
John L. Lewis. All right.
I wanted to become an Orthodox Christian, and I'm not sure how to go and ask a priest or what to ask in order to convert.
Oh, that's an absolutely great question. So I don't want to say that you're shopping for a priest. That's not the right term. But as you already know for those of you that are regulars to our channel here, you know that I speak very, very highly of my spiritual father, who brought me into the faith. I shouldn't say brought me into the faith, but renewed my faith and showed me what Orthodoxy was. So the real beauty, he showed me what that was. So what we have to find is somebody that can speak to us. So he was a particular person that was able to speak to me directly. He knew kind of who I was and the language in which to speak to me. I'm not talking about Greek or English. I'm just talking about my personal, to interact with me. So what I'm saying is it's going to be somewhat of a quest, meaning that there are different Orthodox churches in all areas. And, you've probably met, you've probably met at least 10, 15, 20 priests,
I
right?
grew up in Chicago.
Okay. So,
At
are they all
15.
right the same?
Everybody's different, but they were all students at HCHC at the same time, so it was kind of cool.
Oh, right. Oh,
And-
at
and like
HAC,
heaven on earth.
Holy Cross Atlantic College, which is our school.
And one of the coolest things, I couldn't have been more than 17 or 18. There was I grew up in the Church of the Holy Cross, and Savas was the choir, taught chanting in choir. And so all these alumni came from everywhere, and it was like heaven on earth when they were singing, when they were all got together and they were doing this Vesper service before the feast day of the Holy Cross.
Awesome. Yes.
I mean, it was like unbelievable. It was before iPhones. It was before we
Right,
had, you know what
right.
I mean? Because, I mean, really, somebody should have taped that. That was unbelievable.
So again, it's
And
going to,
Iakovos was there too.
of blessed memory, right?
Yeah,
Right.
of blessed memory.
So like I said, find the Orthodox churches in your area. And again, you may, if you're not Greek Orthodox, if you're not Greek, I mean, you may connect with a Romanian priest, or you may connect with an OCA priest, or you may connect with a priest out of the Greek Archdiocese. So, don't restrict yourself just to us, but, look at Orthodoxy in its totality. And trust me, I know through God's intervention, you are going to find a priest that is going to speak to you, and he is the one that will lead you through the path of Orthodoxy. It happened to me, and I never thought this was all going to happen, but God's hand came down, and here I am now. So,
You're doing a fine job.
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Aaron 88205. Hello, Father. My question is, what is the church's view on the occult, magic, divination, etc.? Can these things hurt us? Also, did you get to see the clip I mentioned a while back regarding the icons?
And I'm trying to recall. Which one that was, and it's just not hitting me right off the.
Sometimes links don't make it through in the chat.
Okay, because
So
I
we
just.
may not have gotten the clip.
All right. So if you don't, and who was that again? That was
Aaron.
Aaron. That's right. So Aaron, if you don't mind, send that clip along again, because I just don't recall seeing that particular one. And but now to get to the question about divinization and magic, all throughout the Old Testament and clearly into the New Testament too, any type of sorcery or magic has been considered, I don't want to say evil, but has been considered antithetical to the one true God. So this belief in the occult, because again, there is kind of a Zoroastrian connection there. So this was never spoken of highly in the Bible. In fact, we have Saint Paul in Acts. We have the Simon, who was the Magi, who was the magician there, and we were just talking about Magi in our what's called our Christmas miniseries there. All right, that the Magi were not really magicians. What they were astronomers and wise men. But if you look at the fate of what happened to then Simon the Magi in Acts, we don't have a good connection with them. So it is antithetical to Christianity to take on anything that has these magical connotations. We have to be careful, because mystical is something different. We are a mystical church, but we're not a magical church.
Well, speaking of magical, I think that's why we have Dr. Strange back in our chat. Yeah, his first question here is very interesting. If you'd like to ask it about Josephus.
Oh, Josephus.
Yes.
Should Josephus be used to prove the historicity of the crucifixion when it conflicts with the Gospel of Luke on the issues of the census of queerness?
Yes. Okay, so Josephus was a Jewish historian at the time, so he was not Christian. He is considered one of the not non-biblical sources that writes of now Jesus as a person. The main thing that we want from Josephus, who is a recognized biblical historian, a historian of the biblical era, because he wrote quite a history on the Jewish revolts, on the Jews under Rome. So that was really his focus. But through his account, we have now eyewitness account or an accounting of Jesus as a person,
A Jewish person
okay, who was crucified.
by the
So,
Romans.
because there are certain people that deny that Jesus was ever existed, that this whole Bible thing is just a story. They just made Jesus up and all that. So the account that is important is not the details of between Josephus and Luke. They were not in cahoots or trying to get the details right. The most important thing about Josephus for that is that through a non-biblical source, we have now the existence of a person named Jesus Christ who was being followed by people who were later called Christians and was crucified. That's important. Because that tells us that the gospel stories, at least on that account, are true. Now, are there differences between events at the crucifixion between John and Mark and Matthew? Of course there are. Because, again, as I mentioned before, if I line three of you up in a room and I ask you what happened a year ago, are your accounts going to be exactly the same?
No, I mean, even if you ask within 5 minutes. I mean,
There you go.
those are studies after studies of people and how credible they are as witnesses, right?
And wouldn't you be suspicious of three stories that are exactly alike? More suspicious than if the stories differed a little bit?
Well, yeah, because then you just have to piece it all together, right?
Right.
Let's see, where are we now? Spiros, who asked about judgment,
Oh, yeah.
is saying, but Jesus said, he who is without sin can cast the first stone. Back to the judgment question.
Yes, but remember we talked about last week, he's talking about the adulterous woman.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Jesus at no time said what they were doing was wrong. They were going to stone the woman who was being an adulteress. Okay? Jesus did not say, do not cast that stone and kill her, it's wrong. He didn't say that. He just said, the person without sin, you cast the first stone. So Jesus did not say, don't be judged, don't judge. And then in the other accounts that we have with the it just how you get like mind block. I'll have to come back. But in that account, it's important to know that Jesus did not tell them what they were doing was wrong. He just said, if you are without sin, then make a judgment. But you can't judge if you are performing the same sin, meaning that I think he was accusing them of being adulterers. And then the other one, that's what it was. He cleanses the lepers, and he says, go back to the priests to make sure that you are clean. He's following the law. He didn't just cleanse them and just said, off you go on your way. He said, no, you all go back to the priests and you get checked out and make sure that you are clean.
Well, I mean, he was from a rabbinical family, right? When they call him teacher
Yes,
and
of
rabbi.
course.
I mean, we keep forgetting Jesus was Jewish. That's why they got all riled up. I mean, he was, when he helps the Samaritan woman, he's helping somebody outside of his culture.
Right, because certainly
And that
they weren't.
gets
Yeah.
lost, right?
Yes.
Because it's an English translation, and we hear, oh, the Samaritan woman, she was probably from Samaria, right? I mean, we lose all that context, and we forget that he spent time in the temple, as did his mother. They were from a rabbinical family, and he was going in there and being
And he
kind
was
of a
teaching in the-
revolutionary.
Yes, and he was teaching in the synagogues clearly. So
Right.
you just don't get to teach in the synagogues if you're not approved, right?
Right.
Right.
And so, I mean, we forget that. It's kind of like, oh, there he is. You know what I mean? But it's like he came from a tradition. That's why they were so mad at him all the time. I mean, they got so mad at him, they crucified him. Right?
True.
Hello, my question is about the pews in Orthodox churches. I come from Serbian Orthodox Church where we don't have pews. So I'm wondering at which point in liturgy does laity sit and at which stands? We don't have pews in Greece either.
No. Pews is strictly an American concept. You don't find them in Russia, you don't find them in Greece, you don't find them in Albania, and in fact, if you go to Russian churches here in America, you don't find pews.
Yeah.
In fact, really, I would have to say pretty much you only find them in Greek Orthodox churches. So when the Greeks came here, they wanted, when you're an immigrant, what do you want when you come to the country?
Depends on where you land. That's what I learned from growing up in Chicago, where people didn't have to become acculturated quickly. And then when I left
Well, I'm talking
Chicago,
about the 20s. I'm
yeah,
talking about
but
the 20s.
no, but I mean, even in the 20s, what you find is that, you know, the HEPA was founded because the Klan was burning us out, right?
Right, right.
So there were people who wanted to assimilate quickly.
Oh, right. So if you're going to assimilate quickly, you're going to do what Americans do.
Right.
And what Americans do is they sit in church. All right. So it is always Orthodox policy that you that you stand during the service. There is no sitting during the service. That just doesn't exist for us. However, we adopted the concept of pews. And so we have assimilated that into the Greek Orthodox American culture here in America. And it's really not part of our culture at all. But it's what was done, the pews were put in, and then after 50 years, it was difficult to get the pews out. If I turn now and I say, okay, well, I want all the pews out, then you're going to have the shortest time priest you've had here.
But in all fairness, they do have the seats around the perimeter of the church where people can.
For the
Right,
older
for the
people.
older
For the
people.
older people. They
And
do have
then
the
when we do-
cathizmat out, right?
Right, so,
Now as in terms of when to sit, okay, normally speaking, any time that the priest is facing you, you always stand. You're supposed to stand while communion is being distributed, and you should also stand when we sing the hymn of the Thersayon. So anytime the priest is facing you, we're singing the Thersayon, or communion is being distributed, you should stand.
and not come into the church, right?
No, I'm not so strict on that. The only time I don't want any movement is when the gospel is being read, because the only thing you should be doing is focusing your mind on the gospel reading, not walking around, lighting candles, anything like that. Everybody who comes to this church knows. No walking during the gospel.
Dr. Strange has a lot of great questions, and I mentioned in the chat that any passage-specific question, we're going to have to do some research, and we'll get back to him
Sure.
next week. He has a question here that does include a passage-specific, but it opens up a bigger question. He says, as a father, should I allow my daughter to read the Old Testament, especially passages like Ezekiel 23:20? Regardless of the passage, how would you introduce a child to the Bible, and what books would you recommend would be child safe, or like how would they mature into the more specific or mature elements of the Bible?
Well, so
Other than our virtual Sunday school.
cool, right. So the easiest answer to that is that, especially with small children, the Bible should always be read by the parent to the child. The reason for that is to show that reading the Bible is not a kid's thing. You know, it's not the parent saying, go read the Bible, because I don't read the Bible. But that's one of the great things that we should learn from the Protestant faith is because there seems to be much more prayer there, family prayer. You know, that there is really prayers in the home. Prayer said before meals, prayer said at night, prayer said in the evening, and then the parent that sits and reads a Bible story with the child. So if you're going to have your child read the Bible, then you read it with them or you read it to them, and then you can help explain some of the stories. Okay, I looked at that one particular passage in Ezekiel. There's no reason why that child should be reading about prostitution and adulterous women and all that. There's no purpose for that.
Other people's junk.
Yeah, other people's junk. I mean, I see no purpose to reading that at all. There is certainly context for that, but you as a parent can decide what is appropriate for your child.
And in our show, we don't really want to focus on the nasty bits of the Bible,
Well,
right?
yeah, right. Now, there is nothing in the New Testament that I would find in any way offensive. Because the message that is preached there is certainly a message of love. From the Old Testament standpoint, I think the first 5 books of the Bible are absolutely beautiful. It is God's story. It is God coming to his people through the creation of the world, through the creation of mankind, through the exile into Egypt, the enslavement into Egypt, and then the God's covenant and Moses brings them out of Egypt. The first 5 books, the Torah, is a beautiful thing that should be read to the children. But some of the other prophetic books, Psalms is wonderful. I love, Psalms is very, very beautiful. Okay, Songs of Solomon can get a little racy. All right, but
Naughty.
But I would say that the entire New Testament, the Torah of itself, the first 5 books of the Bible, I said that's an absolutely great place to start. And then once they have that base story, they shouldn't start with, as you said, people's junk. That's not where the story should start. The story should start with the beauty of who God is. And that's where you can find that.
And there are a lot of children's books and so forth that are
Veggie Tales, right?
Yeah. Because even in the first 5 books of the Bible, you have like passages about circumcision and this and that.
There's a lot, lot in the turning into salt when you,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
There's nothing that's right. There's nothing harmful in
But it's kind
those.
of terrifying.
Yes, but if it's read by a parent, a parent can soften that appropriate for the child's age, And he became a statue of salt. I mean, you can make stories like that. I mean,
was it iodized?
Was he iodized? Yes, he was. That's where the Morton Salt girl came from.
Lots
of life, right?
I'm feeling the flames licking my feet here. Can we move on?
All right.
Let's see. Father, when we pray, are we allowed to expect God to grant our prayer? Or we should just let accept whatever his will?
Ooh, what a great question.
Thank you. That's was.
That's a great question. I have to turn to one of the modern day prophets, Mick Jagger. And what does Mick Jagger say?
You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Exactly right. So, and that is very, very prophetic because I have prayed many, many times.
To win the lotto?
No, I don't pray for the lotto. That is not a retirement plan. There's a wonderful billboard in Detroit, and it says, the lottery is not a retirement plan. I love that. I love it. But there are many times that I have prayed, and what I have received, I'm like, that is not what I asked for. But time goes by, and it was exactly what I needed. So it wasn't what I wanted, but it was what I needed. God answers your prayers. Bottom line, God answers your prayers. That's it. But he's not always going to answer them in the manner that you expect.
You know what I pray for when I'm like really distressed? Strength and wisdom.
I like that. Because it doesn't carry a selfish overtone to it. What I want strength and wisdom to get me through these times. Yeah,
right.
That's very beautiful. That's the way that it should be. So again, just sometimes you have to wait, because in Revelation, and I'm living proof of this, that in Revelation, when you look back, you will see that certain things
Not the book of Revelation.
Not the book of Revelation, but looking back at your life in Revelation, you go, now I see why that happened, or why that didn't happen, or why gratefully I didn't get really what I asked for. Okay?
Yeah. Trench. I asked an Orthodox professor of theology, and he does not approve of what the church is doing. Shouldn't the priest step back and reevaluate what the heads of church are doing? Thanks. What are they doing?
It could be, and I'm guessing it could be.
It's a little vague.
Yeah, it is vague, but I'm going to take a guess, and I think it might be with communion and COVID and everything that's going on around that. That's a guess.
But you don't have to take communion.
So that I think communion. I think Demos is right. Communion is a great answer, because you can go to different priests and different bishops and hear different doctrines on what should be done. Absolutely not. Communion should never be received on a spoon because it can transmit it. Absolutely, you should receive it on a spoon, and we should never change the doctrine that we've had. You shouldn't be receiving communion at all during these times. You should always be receiving communion during these times. So we are not the Catholic faith. We don't have a hierarchical structure that says every priest, this is what you're going to say, and if you don't say that, you're out. We don't have that.
We don't have dogma.
Well, we have dogma.
We're not as dogmatic.
Well, we're not as dogmatic, But we have dogma.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're like who Jesus Christ is, the Holy Trinity, those are dogmatic
Well, no,
statements.
I mean like that, like where everything is itemized,
Right.
right?
And so that allows quite a bit of freedom on, I shouldn't say liberalism, but freedom on the part of the priest to be either conservative, liberal, or moderate. And so because, as you said, we're not this very fixed, dogmatic church, that there is expression. And trust me, you know from this show that some of the things that I say, if you ask our conservative priest, that conservative priest will tell you, oh, Father Angelo, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. And then you'll have liberal priests that will say, I can't believe that Father Angelo doesn't accept this doctrine. So,
We're all different.
we want to try to maintain as much as we can a moderate Orthodox position.
Let's see. Is Jesus Yahweh? If so, did he order people to commit genocide in 1 Samuel 15:3? I think that's what Demos was saying. That's a good email question, right?
Yes, yes. When you email us, I put the email in the chat. And please put in subject Orthodoxy questions answered so we know what it's for, and we can research and come back next week, or even do a full Orthodoxy Greek Orthodoxy 101 video on.
But I want to address part one of that. I want to address part one. So, is Jesus Yahweh? The best that I could, the best way that I could express that is asking you the question is, let me think about how I want to say this. Is an orange snowing? What the hell are you saying?
No,
Right?
I don't know.
Is
It
an
could
orange
be
snowing?
like that Odyssey of the Mind the kids play in school where they compete and,
So
it's like
what-
you're trying to blow each other's minds.
So you don't know how to answer that, right? Is an
Well,
orange
I mean,
snowing?
I could come back with a non sequitur, right? And say, I believe actually
But you cannot fit.
it's raining. You know what I mean? I mean, we could
Yeah,
play
but
this game.
is the orange snowing or raining?
Maybe it's rolling. But do you see what I mean? But it's like it's
So-
all inconsequential. I mean, if
But it is very, the question is not being asked in the right way, is because Yahweh is a Judaic term. That's the name of God. We believe that God's name is Yahweh I am. We are a Trinitarian faith. We believe that Jesus is God and is hypostatically unionized with, he is of the essence of the Father. Okay? So you do not have a Trinitarian concept in Yahweh. That Yahweh is the one God. That's what we believe. But you can't overlay Jesus into a Judaic concept. It doesn't work. We believe that the extension of Yahweh is God, but now God is present hypostatically in three persons: Jesus, the Father, the Holy Spirit. So you can't answer the question in that way because that is a Judaic term. And the only thing that has meaning for us is that he is one, that God is one. But the Jews will tell you, no, he is not three persons. I don't know where you're getting that goofy idea from, these three persons. So they can't overlay Yahweh on top of us, and we can't overlay now the Trinity on top of Yahweh. The rest of it needs,
Yeah,
examination.
we'll get back to that because I'm very interested in that.
but that first part needed some answering. Okay.
Pablo Hendrickson asks, Father, there is no Orthodox church near me. Is it okay if I go to a Catholic parish? It's better I go to a Catholic parish than an evangelical one, right? Question mark.
Okay, I would say yes. Just because again, the Catholic Church is going to best understand your Orthodox leanings, and there was always the Byzantine Catholics. So they are our sister church. I think that evangelical faith is going to be difficult in terms of understanding who we are as Orthodox. to be evangelical. I would say if there was a Lutheran church there, that would be okay. If there was a Methodist church, I could see that, possibly Presbyterian church, but an evangelical, non-denominational, it's going to be too far from who we are as Orthodox.
Yeah, and I've heard that from people who grew up in outside of New York or out in Washington State and places like remote areas that they were discouraged from the Catholic Church and told to go to the Episcopalian Church.
Yeah, my mom. Yeah, she would always tell me, it's better if you go to a Lutheran church than if you go to a Catholic. I don't want you to go to a Catholic church.
Which is funny because we can't we can't convert to Catholicism because we honor each other's sacraments, right?
Yes, but we can't receive communion in the Catholic or the Episcopal or the Lutheran churches.
Okay.
If I may, there is an overall question that's gone back and forth between a few people about whether or not women are allowed to speak in church. Which I think if that was the case, right now...
Right now, you would not be here, right? Okay.
Who asked that?
Quite a few people have gone back and forth on it.
I don't see it. I think they just said that I wasn't answering.
No. It's been gone back and forth, but let's get to the answer.
And there's another whole separation. Where I grew up in Tarpon Springs, there were no women chanters. Women did not chant. I come up to Michigan, and I go to the St. Nectarios in I think North Carolina, and there's women chant. I go to seminary, there's women chanters, and I'm like, how can this be? We can't have women chanters. And they're like, who told you that we can't have women chanters? So we have certain priests who absolutely do not want women in any kind of position of authority in the church. But then we have other priests who say, no, women clearly have a role in church because they are created in the image and likeness of God just as a man is, right? Okay.
And the Virgin Mary, I'm just going to say.
And the Virgin Mary.
Because no Virgin Mary, no Jesus, just saying.
I like it.
Well, I think that sometimes that's glossed over. And I think that when we talk about Jesus as the Son of Man, like, God is God. God could have put Jesus in a Cabbage Patch, but he chose a woman, right?
He chose his own creation. Right? So that he could give birth. So then you will have the liberal Orthodox who will say, I'm not going to the church because women can't be ordained priests.
They used to be.
Not priests. They were ordained deacons, but not priests. So we do have the tradition of women deacons in the Orthodox Church. And there is talk about, between the Orthodox and Catholic churches, of reinstating the deaconess position. It's certainly evident in Acts. We have Phoebe, who is referred to as a deacon, not a deaconess, but a deacon in the masculine sense. And the canons of the church prescribe what are the requirements to be a woman deacon. So clearly we had this tradition, and I think it's then with that precedent, we can return to that. But this is another question that depending upon the priest you talk to, you're going to get different answers. But I know here in this church, we have women chanters, we have women on the parish council, we have women who help me clean. The only role in this church that women are not participating in is the clergy functions. Women in both of my parishes come and assist me in delivering the sacraments to people in the hospital. They'll hold things for me, and they'll introduce me to the people. They'll pastor to them, and pastor in the sense of they know them very well and they'll talk to them so without women, my pastoral mission outside of this church would be severely lacking because they're the ones who've helped introduce me to a lot of the people in the nursing homes.
Did I tell you I was in a convent at the Garden of Gethsemane? Did I ever tell you this story?
Well, it all depends on how long the story is.
Well, it was a pilgrimage that I took. I was the youngest one there because I went with my mother, right? And it was from Chicago, Father John Maggos, right? Who's somewhere in
California.
Headed up, and we went off we went. And there was a convent, and there was when you're monastic, right? But then there was convent. So there was pre-sanctified liturgy, and the nuns administered the communion because it was pre-sanctified.
It was pre-sanctified.
Right.
Yes, yes, and you're right, absolutely. So, so there's something else that a lot of Orthodox laity don't necessarily know about. And we had a Romanian monastery in Michigan, and I saw that also. They couldn't consecrate the gifts,
Right.
but they could because they offered them. Yes.
Like a Eucharistic minister in the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Very good.
Let's see.
Diane.
Let's see. Pablo says, well, if there's no Orthodox church, what shall I do then?
Well, what I would look for then, your next best alternative is a Byzantine Catholic church, because Byzantine Catholic is absolutely the closest that you can get without being Orthodox. So ask the priests in your area if there is a Byzantine Catholic church in your area.
All right, Diane Lukopoulos. Sorry, Diane. Please explain when you decide to make the sign of the cross during Divine Liturgy and during your daily life.
Please explain when or how or.
Yeah, that was the question.
When you decide.
Yeah, when?
Oh, so number one rule. Anytime that you feel moved to make the cross, make the cross. Have you ever had that? You know, where all of a sudden you see something, and you just make the cross?
Right, you just bless yourself,
You
right?
just bless yourself. So anytime you want to make the cross is absolutely fine. So I got to start with that. Next, I would say during the liturgy or during any service, any time that you hear the Trinity invoked, you hear Father, Son, Holy Spirit, that's the time to make the cross. Sometimes, some people, when they are being sensed, when I come down and I do the
Yeah, you
great,
do your
okay, right. When I come by you with the censer, because I am sensing you as the image and likeness of God, you make the cross, blessing yourself. So if I sense you, or if I make, the sign of peace, then people will return that back. So
Virgin Mary, right? When you say the Virgin Mary.
yes, and that's the other when you hear the Holy Trinity or the Virgin Mary, the Theotokos, those would be times to make the sign of the cross. Other than that, you're on your own. Don't let anybody
After
push
the
you,
gospel,
pressure you.
When you do the sign of the cross with the gospel, we cross ourselves.
Okay, yeah, and again, that would be fine. I would say, once I'm reading the gospel and I close it, yes, you can, if you want to. But also during Orthros, when I read the gospel, I can't do it now, but I present you the gospel, and when you go up to reverence it, you would make the sign of the cross before you reverenced it. That's when you would
And
do
when you
that.
get on Didero.
I've seen people that some do, some don't. That's not a real must.
I was just sitting in judgment. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I'm just kidding.
Lest ye be judged.
I know, right? Who's casting the first stone here? Hello, I am currently at Maria Orfrius. Hello, I'm currently a catechumen and struggling with having a Western mindset and guilt tripping myself.
Oh,
Do you have
wow.
any suggestions?
Yeah, that's a really, really tough one to overcome. This idea of Western guilt.
We have guilt. We invented guilt.
Well, I think the Jews invented it. We perfected it.
Okay, maybe.
All right. But guilt doesn't seem to bother us as much.
No, we have total guilt.
We do have, but we're not. Greeks don't get as bothered by it. I absolutely understand that. But guilt is also a weapon of Satan, because guilt without hope or guilt without repentance will cast you into despair, which is exactly what Satan wants. Satan wants you to think of yourself as absolutely worthless in the sight of God. That there's no hope for you, you're absolutely worthless, the things you have done are terrible and cannot be forgiven. And you get into that cycle of despair, and then he won. And that is not who we are as Christians. So I'm not saying that we don't sin, but what I'm saying is you sin, you seek confession, now, and forgiveness from those people that you have offended, right? Whatever it is that you've done, you have to go and seek reconciliation, right? That's what we say in the Lord's Prayer. But once that forgiveness is given to you, you have to let it go. The great ending prayer in confession is, and have no more anxiety over that which you have confessed to me, a humble priest. That is the very last line of confession. And I can't tell you how many times people will come back and say, Father, I confess this sin. I said, but you confessed that already. Did you do it again? No, but I still feel guilty about it. That's a sin. If you don't let go of the sin that you have been forgiven, that is a sin. So you have to work on that Western mindset. And you certainly need to seek reconciliation and forgiveness for those sins that you have committed. But once you have been granted that, then, as Jesus says, go and sin no more. No, which is, we know is impossible.
All right, but we have a presbytera hotline answer.
Uh-oh.
And I'm glad that you brought this up. At Holy Cross Seminary in Boston, there are pews, but no one sits except during the epistle. Because we don't really have to sit during church just because the pew's there, correct?
Well, no, we don't. No, we don't have to. Yes, we don't have to. That is correct. But it can become prideful. I've seen that too, where people will stand the whole time just to show everybody that they can stand. Okay, to some extent, kind of when in Rome,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So, but she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. At Holy Cross, the seats were there, but we weren't supposed to be sitting down except for the epistle, which we were always, me and my buddy were always grateful that we could sit down and take a load off.
That's funny. All right, I'm really trying to read through and see what is a question. So I've got NG1A. Hi, Father. A. Having another, I think it says draft of Glenfiddich with you.
Oh, wow. I wish I was having a draft with you, but
Similar to the issues of pews, choirs also have a Western basis versus cantors. However, Western music style choirs have become the norm as well.
oh yeah, we for a long time, and still there are Orthodox churches in this country that absolutely refuse to have a choir. They see choir as a very Western concept, and it really is. Choir is a stranger to Orthodoxy. But again, we are in this country. We wanted to assimilate. In Protestant churches that their friends went to, they saw a choir. They said, "Oh, how beautiful is that? We want to sing." And so choirs slowly became the norm. Now, to be fair, there is less and less interest in American parishes for chanting. Just because, and this is where I have to be very clear here, is just because you want to chant in the church doesn't mean you should. Because if you don't know what you're doing, then you shouldn't be chanting. We're very fortunate in this church to have two very beautiful chanters who know how to read Byzantine notation, who know how to chant, who practice and do hard work. That's a chanter. But just because you want to chant, that doesn't mean I'm a real estate agent, am I? No. You
Well,
turn
it's
to me
me
and you
like
say,
singing. God, my daughter was in second grade in parochial school, and I was singing in mass. And her second grade teacher was a dear friend of mine, leaned over and said, "God gave you many gifts. Singing is not one of them."
right.
And it's like, how could this be? Because I love music, but I can't. And I think a lot of us grew up, and you may have too, with the very nasally, came from the Horia
That's
chanter.
Yes,
And we
yes.
were all like, "Oh, please, no, stop. Please stop," right?
Right.
And then we had the choirs and things. So, I mean, I think it's been a beautiful thing as we've returned sort of to a Byzantine style of music and chanting.
Yes, but in America we should blend. I love the sound of a beautiful choir. I love the sound of a beautiful choir. But at the same time, I love good chanting. I don't like bad chanting.
We have a question here from Trench. Some priests speak out against the Great Reset, but it seems not enough to speak up against it. How can every priest or head speak up against it more to take effect since it is affecting the church?
Yeah, the Great Reset is very interesting, and many other countries are talking about right now. It is a very politically charged concept that is happening right now.
I've never heard of it.
Yes, this isn't exactly the right moment for us to really go into depth about this.
Okay.
But it is something that we may explore later on. But it is a pretty heady topic for the moment. But it is a very good question, so thank you for it.
Okay.
Let's see. You got a nice. Is it a sin to use drugs from Eric Verbason?
You know, my wife takes medication for a condition that she has. So, is she committing a sin? That's a drug. So, is she committing a sin?
I think he meant illegal drugs.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into what is a bad drug and what is a good drug. That's not the question. That's not what the question should be. The question should be, because Orthodoxy has to stand and has to stand on an idea that can pass by all issues. We can't have one rule for this sin and another rule for this sin and another rule for this sin. This is where we get ourselves into trouble, okay? So drugs are drugs, okay? Every drug has a particular use, okay? Heroin has a use. Morphine has a use. You see it in the nursing homes all the time. Marijuana now has a use. What the Orthodox Church not whatever you want to say, denies, but stands against is the abuse of anything, the abuse of food, the abuse of sex, the abuse of drugs, the abuse of alcohol. So I don't want to get into this is okay, but drugs are bad. No, this is bad if it's abused. Drugs are bad if they're abused. So the question is not about the drug. The question is about the abuse. If you are abusing drugs, the Orthodox Church has a serious issue with that. If you are abusing alcohol, the Orthodox Church has a serious issue with that. But drugs in of themselves, we can't make money, like they say, money is the root of all evil. No. The love of money is the root of all evil. Drugs are not evil in of themselves. It's what people do with them. They use them inappropriately. They use them to excess. They use them for functions that they shouldn't be doing. Those things the Orthodox Church sees as sin, but not the drug itself.
Let's see. Belge says, you are quite the connoisseur, aren't you, Father? An excellent choice of whiskey today.
Thank you. So he's had fire and cane then, I guess.
Yeah. Trench says, if the andillo falls on the floor, should one leave it or does special care need to be done?
If andillo falls on the floor, I pick it up and I eat it.
5-second
rule, okay?
Me too.
Right? I mean, yeah, right? So,
Well, what if it's more than 5 seconds?
okay, the bread is blessed. It's not sacramental. It's not sacramental like the Eucharist, but it is blessed. So if you drop it, you should pick it up. And if you don't want to eat it, you should throw it on the ground so that the animals can consume it. But you should not leave it for everybody to step on.
Dr. Strange asks, does the New Testament prohibit women from speaking in the church?
That's what I mentioned earlier, yeah.
Oh,
And then Pablo says, yes, it does.
yeah. I mean,
Oops, I lost
yeah,
it.
in fact, I don't know exactly, but yes, I think St. Paul says, St. Paul says that women should speak in church. St. Paul says a lot of things, okay? And St. Paul was expecting that Jesus was going to come back within his lifetime.
It's all right.
So he spoke against marriage. He says, I don't think that you should all be getting married, but if it is helpful to you. Okay, so does that mean that we should condemn marriage? In fact, we saw some of the monastics for many years were condemning the idea of marriage, all right? So just because St. Paul says it doesn't make it then gospel truth.
Yeah, because Pablo agreed, and then Dr. Strange wants to hear you, not me. So I'm just gonna take a look.
Well, there was one question I think that should be addressed because we just for clarification about the no Mary, no Jesus comments. Some people were offended by that. Could you clarify on that?
No.
It was earlier.
When I said that if it wasn't for the Virgin Mary, there would be no Jesus.
Well, okay. So not to be flippant on that. certainly God's plan would be fulfilled. I mean, what God had desired will be fulfilled. He chose the Virgin Mary as the vessel for that deliverance. Okay, is that as we say in the creed, and God became man by taking on flesh, and as the Virgin Mary was dedicated in the temple, then the angel Gabriel announced that she was the chosen vessel from which he would take his flesh. Okay, so we don't want to, and then again, we were kind of flipping there, but we don't want to make it look like the Virgin Mary is the only way that God's plan can be fulfilled. It was the way that God chose his plan to be fulfilled, and that's what happened. So, but God's will be done.
Since we're coming to the last couple of minutes, why don't we do a bit of a lightning round for some of the people who haven't had their their questions answered.
Oh, but before we do that,
Yes.
so again, to I think it was Dr. Strange's point about the women, right?
Yes,
I just finishing that up is, again, St. Paul says quite a few things that right now the Orthodox Church is not practicing. All right. So does that mean now that we are sinning and that we are in the wrong? At least if we're following the doctrines of the Orthodox Church, that means no, we are not. So you're right. St. Paul did say that, but also St. Paul said quite a few other things that we are not necessarily following to the letter of what St. Paul said.
Medieval guitar.
Okay. All right. So now you said lightning round.
Yeah, medieval guitar. Good evening, Father. It's only olive oil. Wait, is it only olive oil that is forbidden on a strict fast day, or all oil? The Go Arch website says oil. Thank you.
Well, and that is so that we don't become legalistic. Fasting can become legalistic, and we are not that. So Jesus has passed us by that legalistic form. So for us to say, well, it's not olive oil, but it's a substitute, but it still makes my food taste great. So if you are following the strict fast, then as our Greek Archdiocese says, Greek Orthodox Diocese says, oil is oil. We don't fool around with the name.
And we have Marion Corey. I wanted to know more about what the purpose of fasting is and why it is that in our Orthodox churches we fast off meat, dairy products, and fish.
And again, I want to remind everybody that that on our website, I think it's under the resources area. I have that. I have a paper that I wrote for my parish here on kind of 3 levels of fasting.
And
all right?
a video.
Oh, and the fasting video. So please take a look at that. Please take a look at that position paper. I know that will help. But very quickly to summarize, we should be following the strict fast. That's what we should be following. However, that fast is not appropriate for everybody. Some people have higher degrees of stress in their life. Some people have pre-existing conditions. Some people are elderly. Some people cannot fast for other reasons, and each one of those is determined. That leniency on fasting is determined by that individual's parish priest. That person should go to their priest and say, "Here is what my situation is. What do you suggest for me?" So there is no one strict fasting plan that applies to everybody. There are generic fasting rules, but there's not a fasting plan that applies to everybody. Each person should go to their priest and say, "Father, here's my situation. What should I do for my fast?" And then let him understand your situation, and then take you through that. What else we got?
This could, there's a lot of chatter on the thread, so I'm just trying to get to the place where people have asked a question. So, Father, what is your definition of the term Orthodox fundamentalism?
Orthodox fundamentalism is exactly what we think when we talk about evangelical fundamentalism or Protestant fundamentalism. It is that conservative right. It's this very strict, you know the word akrivia, right? So, right, so economia and akrivia, right? So akrivia is strictness. So a strict application of all Orthodox doctrine is what we would call Orthodox fundamentalism. And there's very, very few people that can maintain that level of discipline. I'm not saying that in any way, I'm not saying that it's bad, but unfortunately, fundamentalism is not appropriate for everybody because, as St. Paul says, now I'm using St. Paul, now I like St. Paul. St. Paul is saying that you cannot eat adult food if you are only a child. So if you now are a child within the Orthodox faith, meaning that you don't know a lot about Orthodoxy, you can't be a fundamentalist because you can't lift a 500-pound weight if you've never exercised before. It takes time to build that up. Okay. And what happens is, and I've seen it all the time, is people try to follow this very fundamental rule and they get depressed and they fall into despair because they can't maintain that level of discipline, and Satan wins. And then they just give up. You know what? I'm not even going to go to church anymore because I can't live to that expectation. That's why parishes have priests. So that person can go there and say, Father, I'm really down. I'm trying to follow the fast. I'm trying to follow this. I don't know what to do. And that priest is supposed to say, and all the priests that I've met so far have been able to say, I know your situation. And what I'm saying is, here is what you need to do. But fundamentalism can sometimes destroy people who are not ready for that level of fundamentalism.
Jay asked a question that I think is very important that we can finish on for the evening.
Why don't you read it?
Okay. How do you convert to Orthodoxy, and is there a process?
Yes. Every parish, every priest has a distinct methodology by which they take you through Orthodox catechism. But the answer to the question about do we have an actual established catechetical program that is approved for all Orthodox churches, similar to what the Catholic Church has? Absolutely not. We do not have that. So it's a much more difficult question to answer because different bishops, different dioceses have different methods. Different countries have different methods of bringing somebody into the Orthodox faith. So again, I really have to direct that question to your parish priest, who is going to have to take you through what his requirements are. Generally speaking, they're going to be the same, meaning that they're going to introduce you to what we do in the church in terms of all of our services. They're going to introduce you to the feasts of our church during the year. They're going to introduce you to certain books, like For the Life of the World by Alexander Schmemann, The History of Orthodoxy by Bishop Kallistos Ware. So there's certain books that really speak to who we are as Orthodox. So it's going to be some combination of attendance, of reading, and then of experiencing then our liturgy and understanding what it is that we do during the different services.
And that's a wrap.
And that's we do have upcoming Christmas virtual specials if you want to talk about it a little bit, give people a sneak peek. We filmed a couple today.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're continuing with our 4-part series of the meaning of Christmas, all right? So we've already talked about the shepherds. We've already talked about the Magi, because sometimes we don't really know who all those people are in the manger. We know who Jesus is. We know who the Virgin Mary is. We know who Joseph is. But those other people around, we don't know. So we've been talking about those. So we've got 2 more coming up, one this Sunday and one the following Sunday. And so this coming Sunday, we're going to be talking about the King of the Jews. We all, I think, know who that is. And then we're going to close with...
Herod?
Herod? No, Santa.
Ruh-roh, I'm going to have to watch this show.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the origin of Santa. I mean, Santa must be based on something, right? So you're going to have to stay tuned for that one. That's going to be a really, really good video about who is Santa. And that's what we're going to close with.
Well, have a very good night, everyone. Thank you, Roxanne, for coming in and
Roxanne, thank you very much.
being our host.
And that was quite the seems like quite the battle out there. There's,
Well, it's
So,
interesting.
it's-
Everybody's an expert.
well, it's really picked up. I mean, we've really got quite a lively debate going on. But as our audience grows, I mean, this is to be expected, right?
Oh yes, I
Yeah.
love it.
And I don't want to shy away. I don't want to shy away from any of the questions. But like I said, when they become theologically deep in terms of like what is what does a particular passage mean, that takes a little bit of research. So
Well, you know what I love about Orthodoxy is that I know we talked about dogma, but I mean, it's not so dogmatic, and it's interesting to see how people need answers to things that we really need to sort of meditate and pray about. I mean, meditate is the word that is sort of a yoga word, but it's something that we really need to take into and to have those answers, then to accept the will of God.
people want answers.
Yeah, I know, but they want it like, okay, chapter 1, rule number 25, and it doesn't work like that in Orthodoxy. You just have to know that you walk in the path, like theoses, right? Which I love.
Right. That sometimes you just have to walk the path in faith.
Right.
Well, hey, listen, everybody, thank you very much, and we'll see you all next week.
And bye-bye.
That was